Suraj Yengde at Harvard Kennedy School is the leading proponent of the Afro-Dalit identity, which is a combination of Africans and Dalits. His main mentor is the famous Cornel West at Harvard University. Now, Suraj Yengde believes that everything wrong with India is due to Brahmins, including the fact that he thinks Brahmins didn't earn any resources through merit but by looting.
The resources one is having is not earned on merit, is by looting, is by thuggery.
He wants to attack the very deep structures of Hinduism as the cause of all problems.
Unless we recognize that those structures exist around you, you will still be part of a casteist regime, because you have slowly, in your patronizing, charitable way, very subtly contributed to espousing.
And these structures, he says, are the fault of karma theory, which is, of course, at the very center of Hinduism.
Here, the labor is tied within the scriptural karmic theory, and so they are quote unquote paying or their penance.
In this way, abuses get blamed on Brahmins, Brahmins get blamed for karma theory, and karma theory at the heart of Hinduism requires that Hinduism has to be dismantled. Yengde applies the Marxist dialectic to claim that Buddhism is the antithesis of the Vedic thesis.
When the Buddha came onto the consciousness of India, he became a biggest threat to the Vedic caste system, because Buddha just crumbled the house of cards of caste system.
He says that those who followed Buddhism were assassinated and or declared untouchable.
Because Buddha offered that, many tribes which were eventually declared untouchables became the part of Dhamma. And because they were part of Dhamma, there was a repeated assassination of the people who were identifying themselves in the pathway of Dhamma.
In fact, he says Buddha himself was violently attacked by Hindus.
Buddha himself was subjected to several attacks, physical, spiritual.
You can see the divisiveness in this particular use of Buddhism as a club to bash Hinduism and the Vedas. According to Yengde, there has been a genocide against Dalits since independence, and in a certain 10-year period alone, over 500,000 atrocities committed against Dalits.
From 2006 to 2016, about 500,000 atrocities were committed against Dalits. It's a genocide that we saw under our eyes. Yet, and this is not a new incident, this has been happening since independence era, prominently with immense amount of brutal massacres.
In the following clip, he gives a dog whistle as if indicating that a violence from Dalits would be reasonable.
Yet, Dalit have not invoked civil wars. They have every reason to.
He openly brands the upper castes as criminals, not because of anything individual, but because as a community, the whole community are criminals.
From my vantage point, these are criminal castes. There is no other way I will identify them. They have committed a crime on my community and they are criminals to me. If Thakurs have committed crime, they are criminal caste for me.
The whole theory being spun at Harvard by Yengde and his colleagues says that upper castes should be treated as criminals, prosecuted as such, not based on any individual things somebody may have done, but because as a community their ancestors were criminals, they did bad things against Dalits. Yengde is very clear that the Vedas made women into slaves.
That's why when the first slaves were happening, especially in the Rigvedic times, women were the slaves, first slaves. So if a person was to marry second wife, most likely he murdered the first wife.
He wants to dismantle the Indian family system because it transmits abuse to the next generation.
One is born into a certain Indian family that practices certain faith. They're actually coming into a family that is conditioning the behaviors. The pronouns are already granted, and the role of a woman is already destined.
The norms of the Indian family, he says, are too resilient.
You can't break those regulations and norms, and if you challenge the question, you are a woman who is bitter.
Indian tradition is a sham. It's just been created to project values of oppression upon people, including things like festivals.
Tradition as a thing doesn't exist. We just have created this to bring out our own values and impose onto the rest of the majority, like festivals and all, become part of quote unquote tradition.
In other words, Yengde finds nothing of value in the Hindu tradition. I have tried to approach Suraj Yengde, and I wish he were available for amicable discussion over different issues so we can have a win-win outcome. We can all work together for the betterment of all communities and not just pit one against another. But right now, he has set himself up as the spokesperson for a very extreme form of racial justice, which is reverse discrimination. This is not the kind of justice that Reverend Martin Luther King wanted, or his mentor Mohandas Gandhi, and even right up to the time of Barack Obama. The movement of African Americans was to seek justice within the structures of society, within the constitution, within the norms of society, and modify them, remodel society, keep evolving society rather than dismantling structures. Nor was it true that all the horrible racial history of America had to be projected onto other countries like India, which have a very different history, very different sources, very different history, and this is a kind of a problem that we consider to be unreasonable. I don't think blacks are being served well with this attitude, nor are Dalits in India necessarily helping with this kind of an artificial conflation. In the next series, we will show you that this whole movement, the Dalit movement led by people like Yengde, and Yengde is just one person we're featuring, there are many more like that at Harvard. This has arrived in India, right in the Supreme Court of India. In fact, Justice Chandrachud loves to quote all this. He's a product of all this ideology. He's a product of critical caste theory, intersectionality, all of these things. We'll get into that in the next series.